I guess where I'd like to begin with Leslie is that she is one of her son. Oh, excuse me for a moment. Did he give you the survival face? Oh, George. He's teaching me something, Charlie. But Leslie Harper is, I think one of the things that I admire most about her is that she came to Ojibwe-Moan as a second language speaker as an adult, and she learned her language. But what I most admire is that Leslie, raising her son, Mitt, he is one of only 2 children in the past 50 years who are first language speakers now of Ojibwe. And I think that takes an extraordinary amount of commitment to learn a language and then raise your children in that language. So Leslie also has, she's very humble, and she has, when she speaks about the work that she does at Ngani, it's just a way of being for her. And for us to have Leslie here is really an honor. I think it's second best to seeing Leslie in her environment. And it, I have to say that having known Leslie for several years, but having the opportunity to go to Ngani Ojibwe-Moan school was really transformative for me to see happy children. Children not just happy, but children who feel good and confident about who they are, who walk in the world in a way, especially the middle schoolers and teenagers, who are, hold themselves high. They believe in who they are, and I can only imagine what kind of adults they'll become to really change the community and make it a well and healthy place. And so today, Leslie gave us a picture of what Ngani looks like, and tonight she's gonna help us to imagine and envision the future of language immersion and culture-based education in honor of Dr. Demmert. As a friend of Dr. Demmert, as a mentee of Dr. Demmert, and also I really am honored to know Leslie as someone who actually not just talks and thinks and feels about it, but actually takes the action to make it happen. So I'm hoping that we can all be better and as we walk forward into this world of culture and language because of our relationship with Leslie. So Leslie, welcome.
Yeah, I probably would. Black coffee with cake. Usually I don't like black coffee, but
I don't know where it was good to stand here, so I'm not in everybody's way. Ginawa dana me kunin ginawa sa shai go gawe in unan sabujiwe gawe kaya tishina kas mang dude chuasa nge isha patakushina mama chuasa dike ama nusira wa kaya dana nakyan kaya go inji kingdom kaya ana ma ila inji pitena ma we sawa kiwe sipan ani tashimak nungo ani tashimak pa nungo Ogigo and Dokaj Shinagawi Kadoanama Kuchiboy Kakapitun Kakapitun Shiniman Chigaya Oma Dami by Chinadinawa Atakushinameke Gaye Linisa Dutan Lishkan I Kazie sa dami ko ichinen at ko siya na kumanan ko ila ikay mi ko ichinen na actually paayaya ko ma. I'm Leslie Harper. I'm from the Leech Lake, Ojibwe Nation in North Central Minnesota. And some of you were here today. I just told you who I am. I am an Ojibwe woman from Leech Lake in North Central Minnesota. It's kind of a long ways away. Kind of a ways, but things are easier these days. I'm really grateful to all of you for coming out here, and I've been treated very kindly here. For that, I've got to thank everyone. This is a really welcoming community, and I really appreciate all the kindnesses that have been shown to me in the time that I'm here. I get a little nervous. I get a little shy when I think about the title of this talk, the honoring Dr. Bill Demmert series, because he meant so much to so many of us, and because he meant so much to me. It was a lot to think about. How will I come out into this community that was such a part of him for so long? And I guess the only way to do that is to come out and do the work that he taught me about. So earlier today I talked a bit about our school. Where I'm at in Minnesota, we have an Ojibwe language immersion school, kindergarten through 6th grade. It's actually a language revitalization site disguised as a school. It just happens to be a school. We could have chosen a healthcare clinic, we could have chosen the Justice Center, we could have chosen, any institution in our community. What really started this all is it's language revitalization. We're losing our Ojibwe language at home on the Leech Lake Nation. We did something. We made a decision somewhere along the line in the last 10 or 15 years to say we're going to institutionalize our language somewhere. We're going to have kids together for a long amount of time with speakers of Ojibwe, and something good's going to happen. Pretty much what we did. And we opened the doors to a school. We convinced a few nut jobs to enroll their kids in our school. My son was in the first cohort of students. We held their hands and we cheered them on and we said, don't disenroll your students, keep your kids in here. And they did. A couple years ago, we graduated out our first cohort of 4 little kids who came to our school from kindergarten through 6th grade. And broke our hearts. We had to send them out to English medium schools in the area because that's the only other alternative in our rural northern Minnesota area. But darn it, those kids are amazing. We gave them something amazing that they weren't getting anywhere else. We gave them a great base of being, a great base of Ojibwe, indigenous personality and knowledge, and they're doing pretty good. They are carrying forth Ojibwe knowledge. Now, it's a terrible time to transition kids out. It's middle school, it's 7th grade that they're going out. They're hormonal and nuts, and other kids are hormonal and nuts, and it's a really tough transition time. The kids that we've graduated out actually showing quite a bit of leadership in the communities that they go into, and they're showing confidence. They speak with their peers about Ojibwe cultural teachings, about Ojibwe cultural knowledge, humor, and a lot of that stuff. They're really confident about it, and they say, hey, you're having a hard time getting through that? Well, let me tell you something my grandma told me once, and this is how we get through it. They're cool. They're really cool kids who are really expressive and really able to take care of themselves out in the world. We couldn't be more proud of them. So we did something right. I talked about a lot of those somethings that
that we consider, you know, and there's a lot of details. There's a lot of determination, there's a lot of articulation, there's a lot of specificity in every activity we encounter, everything we do every day that we worked on to get those kids doing pretty okay when they leave our school. So it's taken 10 years for us to get, you know, to this point where we feel okay and where we see the kids are doing well when they leave our schools. You know, we started from nothing. We started in a room smaller than this room. 5 kids, a couple of old people who talk Ojibwe, and one Yahoo from our generation who's learning it as an adult, you know, who spoke English all his life and, you know, just started learning Ojibwe language as an adult. The room we started in was smaller than this room. And 5 little kids coming in and doing this, and a lot of heart. And we had a lot of heart, you know, and that's where we started. And then we took those kids through and we added a grade each year. Yeah, we were crazy. We had no idea what we were doing. We added a grade every year, so this is the big experiment. Hey, next year's another big experiment. Hey, next year's another big experiment. We've never had 2nd grade, we've never had 3rd grade, we've never had 4th grade. Let's put on a show. We did it, and so it's constant reflection. It is constant reflection and consideration, being very intent, saying, what can we do better? What did we do well? What stunk? What absolutely didn't work? What are we gonna throw out? But really, that's what it comes down to. Constant reflection and constant determination of those priorities. What are we gonna teach? What is the Ojibwe culture base that we're bringing up in this school? How is this benefiting our Ojibwe community? So that's a lot of what I talked about today. Not for me? Me? Wait. That's why we do this. So there's kids making coffee for us. Helpful little addition of 8 kids. That's what we're trying to make. So it's taken us 10 years of total creation and recreation every step of the way. And what we do now is we get together and we say, where are we at? Now what? And it becomes a lifetime of work. It is absolutely a lifetime of work. I showed you guys some great pictures earlier today. There were some, you know, just to contextualize the site for you. This is kind of where we left off. This word, Demmert, talks about this concept of they're being busy. And there's this old story that uses that word very specifically to talk about being busy. And we talk about this otter, Nigik, who is doing something. And somebody was calling out to him for some help. And there was Otter, and this is how the story goes. And there he was, way off in the lake. And every now and then, you'd see him come up, and that old man would be hollering, hey! He needed that otter's help way out there in the lake, and Otter, then he'd dive back down, because you know how otters are. And then he'd come back up, and that old man would see his head come up, and he'd say, hey! Hey! And that otter would just keep diving. And finally, the old man was yelling, hey! Hey! To the otter, and he's like, I'm busy. This is what I do. This is what I was born to do. I'm an otter. I'm swimming, you know? And just that idea that you're busy doing what you're put here to do. It's more than just I'm real busy. I got this task to get done, but the idea that you're busy doing what you were put on this earth to do. And that otter said, I'm really sorry. I'm swimming. That's what Creator put me down here for. I can't come help you, old man. Eventually he did. It's a much longer story, and it's actually a really sacred story, but that was the only example I can think of right then and there. We used it to talk about our kids. To make how look. When I get sent out to talk about our school, we consider this. Our elders helping put this presentation together, our other staff members, our other parents, and they say, this is what you're gonna go out and say. This is what you're gonna go out and talk about. And they asked me to talk about that word, fundamentawag, because all of a sudden, from a few generations of loss, we've got this group of little kids who are, again, just living lives as little Ojibwe kids. They're not little American kids, which is what we're seeing in most of our other communities. But these are Ojibwe kids with Ojibwe sensibilities and just this genuine base. And they're not searching for an identity. They know who they are. 10 years, that's fast. That's a really fast turnaround. It's lightning, it's whiplash inducingly fast to those of us who are in it to look at this and to say, holy smacks. No, it's not overnight. Yeah, there's only 35 kids. Yeah, I've only got 2 6th graders this year. You know, it's small, tiny movements, but they're being recognized in the community. So fundamentawag, I love that word. Just as an Ojibwe person, what it means to us, it's really specific. And talking about how no longer are our kids, we have this group of kids who aren't looking in and searching and feeling like they're not even a part, but that they really truly are Ojibwe. And we've done this in our community. Now if we can get it to spread out to some new places, what comes next? And some of the stuff we talked about earlier today was just articulating what kind of teaching methods we use. I always get asked that kind of question when we go up. But we consider social and academic content at our site equally. There's a lot of EIE schools, there's a lot of schools out there serving Indian kids who say, gosh, your kids just aren't passing those tests. We gotta put more math, we gotta put more reading time in there, more direct instruction time, and throw out those goofy language and culture classes. You know, maybe if you've got time after school or on the weekend. No, absolutely not. We actually consider our social content just as an important part of the curriculum as academic content. So, you know, we've got a lot of social ideas and citizenship ideas that go into our curriculum. Okay. We tend not to translate existing academic curriculum because, again, translating Houghton Mifflin's math series, that doesn't necessarily reflect Ojibwe ideals that we're trying to promote. And I don't mean to be this rampant nationalist. I'm no nationalistic zealot. But what we really are working to do is to recreate an Ojibwe perspective so that we can produce Ojibwe thinkers who are able to take that base of understanding and go out anywhere in the world and apply it and interact in any community in which they enter, but to really hold on to an Ojibwe perspective. Because we have a lot of really cool and really sophisticated understandings. So, it's not enough to just learn a few words, a couple of nouns here and there. What we really do at our site is for high levels of oral proficiency, high levels of written proficiency. And again, talking about what does it look like in a Native American language immersion setting? We're not sure. It hasn't been studied too much. There are other world languages that have been doing immersion for a really long time. There's a big, long line of academic research about that. So we kind of look at some of that, but we're not really sure what Native American language immersion settings look like. We're not really sure what trends of acquisition are. We're basing a lot of our stuff on some of the world language immersion settings. But what does it look like? This was our board from a parent-teacher conference. This was a kindergarten class. It's really small, it's really hard to see. And this is written in English because a lot of the parents of our students are not highly proficient in Ojibwe. So this was our kindergarten teacher saying, these are kind of some of the things we go over in here. Your little 5-year-old comes in here for the cute little kindergarten class. Here's what we've been working on the last few weeks. And he says, we're working on feelings. Your kid is able to talk about feelings. Oh yeah, we're learning shapes and how to apply that, how to find it. Yeah, here's some verbs we're working around. See it, see him, walk, walk fast, run, you know, real basic stuff. Oh yeah. We're working on these colors and how we talk about colors in here. And then he throws in, we're working on bits and count. And we go, huh? What's that? He's like, oh yeah, we're working on our basic interpersonal communication skills. And we're working on a transition to CALP, you know, cognitive academic language proficiencies. And here's the parents going, I just came in for the kindergarten parent-teacher conference. Show me the triangles my kid made and pasted it onto a piece of paper, you know. But he got really specific with identifying fixed and CALP language. Oh my goodness, look at, we're working on cultural specific standards, you know. So all of a sudden, we're considering more and more and more. And this is just a basic day. What was our cultural learning? How chipmunk got his stripes, how rabbit got his long ears. Out of those, they were making math lessons. Out of those stories, they were making reading and science lessons. They were making communication lessons. They were setting oral proficiency standards for 5-year-olds. So that's what it starts to look like in our community. I don't know. And again, just talking about not translating and some of the items that we work on. Our kids are coming from English-speaking homes into a total language immersion environment. So they may not be ready for content. If we translate a first-grade reader over, they might not be at that level of proficiency in our language. So we have to do a lot of adjustments. So our school starts to not look like a standard Minnesota state standards benchmarks model. It starts to look different, and it's us determining those differences according to how our kids are picking up language, and according to how our kids are picking up communications processes. This is educational determination. And it is, to us, it makes the most sense to do it like this. To us, it's not prescriptive. It's us determining this. Let's move on. A lot of people ask what works for us. What existing models do work, and people say, can we see your curriculum? Can we see your items? And we go, well, our curriculum's not going to make any sense to you. It's written in Ojibwe. It's very locally specific. You know, it's very Ojibwe culturally specific. No, you can't see it. But I'll tell you some of the models that exist out here that you can look at that seem to work for us. Cognitively guided instruction map. It's awesome. Numeracy training for kids. Responsive classroom for community building and citizenship. That's the elders in our community said that's pretty. It's pretty similar to a lot of Ojibwe ideals, and it was easy to use that. We have classifications inherent in the specificity of our language. Our language is agglutinating. It means you can take a word, you just keep adding on pieces and parts to either end of it. You can have a word this long in the end. It's amazingly specific and descriptive and funny a lot of times. So when we start talking about science, as you study science in school, the classifications, the kids are ready for that kind of stuff after they've been learning languages like this and in this manner. The classifications are really easy for them. So I talked about that. And very important, our social expectations of our students. This is very important to us. this is written in English. What we did was elicitation projects at home with first speaker elders. What's important? What kind of kids do you want to get out of here? What's a well-rounded Ojibwe sixth grader look like when they come out of here? And they said they want high levels of self-regulation, moderation, able to handle themselves in situations, a love of learning, and that sort of independent, autonomous kind of action, that ability to think and determine one's truth for oneself. And I remember and so this came from a project that we worked on with elders around, Ojibwe elders around Ojibwe country. They were from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ontario, and Manitoba. And we went around and held these focus groups and held these survey groups and asked them, how should our school look? And this is the stuff we did before we started our school. And we said, we don't want it just to be a model of public schools. How do you think? What does learning and teaching look like? And so that came from Ojibwe elders. And I remember being at one of our research team meetings with Demmert, where he pulled up something. And he pulled up some academic, researchy kind of thing. They had worked on a colloquium I don't know, in 2000 something. And somebody had determined these indicators of all the future academic success for kids, and a couple of the most important ones were the kids' social development by the age of 5.5. You know, how well was a kid able to self-moderate? How able was a kid to tend to tasks? And that kind of stuff by the age of 5.5, you know, was going to affect all our future learning. And I just thought, of course, Anishinaabe have known this for millennia. You know, by the time kids are this age, this is typical Ojibwe expectations. And then, you know, here's some researchers from some federal project in 2002 or something who are finally coming around to figuring out the same thing that we've known for millennia. You know. So they go together well. Let's get that. Blah, 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 blah. Same kind of things we do. What is really important? We talk about data and accountability, and I won't bore you with that, except to say that we're working on it from an Ojibwe perspective. We've created assessments in the language of instruction to measure math and reading achievement. We've tracked them. We're keeping our numbers. We know there's accountability at play. But we always want to ensure that it's Ojibwe culturally appropriate as well. What do assessments look like? And again, those are the determinations that we need to make in our community. You know what? And what would we do differently? We would always ensure that we're considering our stakeholders. Always, always, always. Looking at the changing dynamics of our community, looking at the shifts in our community, we would always make sure we're considering our stakeholders and always find ways to gain their participation. When you're doing transformative education and you're charging forward with a new movement, it's easy to just keep charging forward. And we have to always ensure that we're keeping people informed and participating. It's hard work. It's really hard work. And what would we do differently? We would look at our leadership structure, and we would ensure that our infrastructure is fully Ojibwe enacted. Where we're hosted right now is typically not Ojibwean. It's beginning to look like a model of the public schools that we, started our school as an alternative to. It doesn't look very Ojibwe, the structure in which we exist. So it's a really hard thing to do, to exist as Ojibwes in a system that's not designed for that. So a little bit about our school. That's what's going on. That was the quick overview. And I talked a lot about like federal level regulations earlier and how we determine highly qualified teachers within the No Child Left Behind Act, how we determine funding sources, that kind of thing. But another thing that's going on right in our state of Minnesota, a lot of the things that hold us up, and what I've heard from other immersion educators around the US, is that the idea of highly qualified teachers, people who are licensed, people who've been through college teacher ed programs are not culturally proficient enough or linguistically proficient enough to promote the language or culture, and they're not meshing. So some of the work we're doing in Minnesota is trying to put these licensing requirements for teachers in the schools, teachers of language, together with the communities of the 11 tribal nations in Minnesota. And we are working with the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. The Minnesota Indian Affairs Council is a state, quasi-state agency. It's a liaison between our tribes, our 11 tribes, and the state of Minnesota agencies. We're supposed to be advisory to the state government in Minnesota as the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. Oh, why did the print go all weird? What happened was, a few years back, the Minnesota State Legislature amended our constitution to provide for a little increased sales tax. That would fund arts and cultural heritage legacy projects and some environmental projects. Well, what is more indicative of Minnesota's cultural heritage than Dakota and Ojibwe projects? We are the original tribal nation inhabitants of our states. So we went through the whole legacy amendment, as it's referred to now, the legacy amendment, and said, you know, you really ought to provide for some Dakota and Ojibwe language revitalization projects. And lo and behold, they did. We were convincing enough, our 11 tribal nations in the state were convincing enough, and beginning in 2009, the legislature appropriated a chunk of money from this increased sales tax revenue to the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. And part of that activity was to convene a volunteer working group on Dakota and Ojibwe languages. Like, why do you guys want money? Why do you want to do projects? Give us a compelling reason. Do a feasibility study for us, give us a good report, tell us what the outlook, the projected outlook for Dakota and Ojibwe languages in our state is. So we're like, okay, cool. So they convened a working group, and now we meet monthly. So what they did was they brought together a lot of different, again, stakeholders, and we've got people from all across the state. We've got representatives from each of the 11 tribal nations, so we've got tribal representation. We've got folks from several different commissioners' offices within the state of Minnesota are assigned to the working group. We were assigned to do a feasibility study on Dakota and Ojibwe language revitalization projects within the state. We were also assigned a task of create a 25-year plan for Dakota and Ojibwe language revitalization in the state of Minnesota. Okay. And there's another arm of the project that awards grants to Dakota and Ojibwe language revitalization projects in our state. We hit the jackpot with this legacy fund, with this increased sales tax amendment. This, you know, really gives us a lot to take care of at this point in time, if you consider all of these activities. Okay, so basically, we are responsible for the big long-range plan, short-term, you know, creating a feasibility study, the strategic planning, and then administering grant awards for Dakota and Ojibwe language projects in the state. I'll tell you a little bit about the initial report that we created in the first biennium. This is what we found, and this is what we submitted to the legislature. Indigenous languages are in critical condition. Seems like a no-brainer to the people in this room, but we really had to make this statement to the people of Minnesota. We really needed that plain statement to be put out in our state. That was once all Ojibwe and Dakota country. We needed to remind them. Indigenous languages exist and they're in critical condition. Successful models exist, Maori, Hawaiian language revitalization. But here's what's interesting. There are over 100 language programs across our entire state to support Ojibwe and Dakota revitalization, although very few fulfill all requirements. Another key finding in the report, language immersion needs curriculum. They need teachers. They need funding for training and just ongoing programmatic stuff. Again, I could have told you guys that. I didn't need a feasibility study. No, but these are key findings in here. And that has an impact on both the tribal nations in the state, but also on many of the non-Indians in the state, because ultimately we're not on islands. It has impact on everyone. Everyone can benefit from learning about Ojibwe and Dakota cultures and including those contributions in there. So that was the key findings of the feasibility study in our first biennium. Now the other arm of it that we talked about, what we were responsible for, is creating a grant award program. We created one from scratch. We had no framework, we had no idea this money would be awarded to us. This was kind of a bonus add-on, and there was no way that the Minnesota tribal nations were going to say, oh, we don't need that. But we had to create a whole grant award program. We had to create criteria. We had to create ratings. We had convened an independent team of readers to rate people's proposals. Incredibly technical work done by a volunteer work group. We were all volunteers on there. Successfully distributed. In 2010, $500,000. 2011, we had an increase of $700,000 to give away. 2012 and 2013, another $550,000. You know, this was pretty significant for the state of Minnesota to have gone from nothing to having this available. And I think that's averaging about 9 to 10 awards per year. And there, a couple of those years, there may have been a couple more. But we're pretty happy with being able to do that. People say, well, what in the heck did you fund? And we had to say, what did we prioritize as Dakota and Ojibwe language projects in the state? We funded immersion camps, language tables. There's a new online dictionary being created as a resource. We prioritize collaborations between tribes. A lot of people said we need to develop curriculum for our public school setting where we teach language as a foreign language. We would like to create an advanced course at the university because right now we only have 2 real basic courses, you know. So there were a lot of different levels, a lot of different scope and sequences proposed. People requested just documentation, more ongoing documentation of the remaining speakers of Dakota and Ojibwe in our state. And a lot of people are now beginning to look at teacher training. They're just now beginning to look at that, and we saw a few proposals come through requesting help with colleges and communities coming together to talk about language teacher trainings. So the long-term vision was that Dakota and Ojibwe are spoken and valued as vibrant, living, and thriving languages throughout Minnesota. So what do we want 25 years down the road? Instead of being these critically endangered languages that are housed only at the university in a level 1 and level 2 class. You know, the long-term goal is that, heck, why not? Dream big. That our languages are valued, that our languages are vibrant and thriving. So this is what our volunteer work group convenes upon. So I was telling you about the first biennium that we were funded. We started that strategic plan, you know, the 25-year plan. God, that's huge. That's crazy to think about. So we get funded for 2 years at a time, and then we go back to the legislature and we propose that we're going to do this work and we're going to go on. One of our goals, so some of the big overarching ideas. Our goal is to improve opportunities to learn Dakota and Ojibwe languages. Right now, lots of scattershot efforts. There's no academy. There's no real consistency. And we said, we've got to just get some opportunities out there. We got to tighten them up and strengthen them. That would include improving existing immersion programs. Our school exists, K through 6, Ojibwe language immersion. There is a language nest connected to the University of Minnesota Duluth that is for babies aged 3 to 5. There's a preschool effort in the Twin Cities area for both Dakota and Ojibwe language immersion. So we talked a lot about continue to fund current immersion schools. They're always scrambling for money. They're always scrambling for development dollars. We think that those immersion schools are doing good jobs preparing their kids, and that you should help to improve those, but also that you should fund new educational sites, because a lot more people are kind of getting hip to this idea. Also language camps and just getting those professionals together to talk about how it works well, and what they can do to help improve. A second goal, the goal in this report that we did, our first report, create and improve access to language materials. Oh, and these responses and these answers came from a statewide survey. We proposed a survey to educators and students throughout the state, people who are involved in both learning and teaching and supporting Ojibwe and Dakota language projects in the state. We had a pretty big response, so we felt pretty good about putting these out here. Everybody says we need more materials. We got nothing to use that's grabbing the students, whether they're this big, whether they're high school students, whether they're university students. We don't have texts, we don't have recordings, we don't have flashy this and that. So there were some activities that we talked about in there. One more goal, broaden public awareness of language revitalization. Remember, we had to tell everybody, you know, our languages are in danger. A lot of people, even in Minnesota, don't think we exist anymore. Ojibways and Dakotas. So, not only do we have to say we're here, we're hanging in, we're doing relatively well. Now we got to talk about what's the point of language revitalization. How is this helping the taxpayers of Minnesota? We know you guys want it for your tribal nations. How is this, you know, benefiting the entire state of Minnesota? Well, heck, we're going to raise everybody's ideas about language revitalization in our state. So, you know, some of the projects that we talked about are creating a greater presence in media. We have public radio, we have public television stations. You know, why the heck not use those outlets and promote language and culture? Why not promote signage in our public areas that have Ojibwe and Dakota languages on them? We do need to work with other private foundation funders, with other State Department funding sources and decision makers just on, you know, what's the importance of this. And some of our tribal governments still need to really consider if they think that's important enough. So yeah, we've got to broaden public awareness. Another separate goal that came out of our report was maintaining an organizational capacity. This was a volunteer work group that met monthly. We just came together on our own time, our own dime. And we realized there are all these priorities, all these things to maintain and to monitor. What we have suggested is to have an organization that can sustain these ongoing activities. If we really did have a 25-year plan in front of us, we would have advocacy and support for technical assistance. We would be able to administer and support the funding pools. We could cooperate on fundraising. Again, just talking about that government liaison role. Heck, just someone to keep up a website is a lot. Just, smaller functions like that. But that we really do need a presence within the state of Minnesota. Some kind of an organization, whether it's a private, whether it becomes a nonprofit, whether it's tribally controlled. That was just one of the things that we identified in our report. So again, what does it come down to? Like the meat tower. I got all this blah, blah, blah behind the scenes stuff. I've got all this public policy hoo-ha and survey this and survey that and statute 125.427B business. But what it comes down to is these guys. And the meat tower, making sure that they're able to continue just being beautiful little Ojibwe and Dakota kids within our state in the ways that they're meant to be. That's really what it's about. I do all the blah, blah, blah behind the scenes so that they can do that. That's what I've done. Mama, we got me doing tonight, we were doing. We everything the more than the Shinabe. I can't go get the more. All of us together are going to carry it forward. Every one of us needs to be in there. That's our kids at school. Some of them, aren't they cute? And that's it. Misa Goyo. That was just a picture of what we're doing in Minnesota right now, on a more state level kind of idea. I got really excited about it because Minnesota hasn't done anything in a long time. We were once really leaders in Indian education and in policy matters and policy efforts, and then kind of stalled out. And some of these other states have started to move ahead of us. And so I'm pretty excited about the direction that we're taking once again, talking about this inclusion and this long-term planning. But the big thing for us is working on teacher training programs, collaborating with teacher colleges in our state, and with the tribal nations, and putting those together and making teacher training programs that really look like Ojibwe and Dakota people want.
Someone back there behind him.
Leslie gets comfortable with questions. Yes. On behalf of Western Washington University and all of us here tonight and our communities, we wanted to thank you for all the work that you're doing and being here and honoring Dr. Demmert.
And none of you fell asleep, thank you. I thought post-lunch was tough. Post-dinner is even tougher. It's a lot of public policies. Blah, 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 blah. But it's so important. And this is what Demmert built. you know? He wrote this initial legislation, and he and his peers and my parents, and, you know, now it's up to us to keep moving forward and to keep up with that. And there's no other way to say it, you know? This is how we honor those ones that went before us. Questions for Leslie? Comments?
I do have a comment. I just appreciate the work that you've done and coming here and sharing. And I was at your earlier presentation, and I appreciate that one as well. And I like how you framed this one, though, that you started with a small program or project, and just the way that you described it is much smaller than this, but it really has amounted to having a big impact, which is really important. And I really like how you framed it for the purpose, which is for children that you're trying to impact. And I think that's a really useful thing for us, in our community here. Whether we, what we consider a community here at Western or in the Coast Salish territories, and I think that's a really valuable thing that you shared with us. I sincerely appreciate that. Thank you.
Sometimes I worry I'm so close to it. I think, am I making sense, or am I the crazy lady on the corner throwing cats at people? You know, we're so in it. We're so in the work that we're doing, and so I hope it makes sense. I hope it can help some of the efforts that folks are putting forth.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful question that you asked us to try to carry out that work.
Your teacher training, Leslie, who do you have on board now or online now?
What has been good is the formation of this legislative work group that I talked about this evening, because prior to this, our Department of Ed was not real receptive. Our Board of Teaching has not been receptive to any of our tribal nations, to any of our determinations. I talked about this K-12 American Indian Language Culture license earlier today. That was in the late 80s that we passed that and got that going. Since then, the Department of Ed in Minnesota has been kind of turning their head to us, and we knock on the door and they pretend they didn't hear, you know. They don't want to pay attention to the tribal nations of Minnesota. They say, nope, follow our rules. We have no exceptions for you guys. You know, this is where you're gonna follow our rules. So they were actually assigned to be members of this volunteer work group. Folks from their offices were actually assigned to come into these Minnesota Indian Affairs Council meetings. So we have someone from the Commissioner of Ed's office, we have someone from the Board of Teaching who is assigned to be there. We have Commissioner, the Human Rights Commission office is supposed to have someone at our meeting. So we actually have State Department folks who are present there who have to come to the table with us when we start talking about teacher prep programs, when we start talking about amending licensure areas within the state, when we start talking about the teacher prep requirements that the BOT, the Board of Teaching, is proposing, or that we would propose be added in. We are considering ideas of the ongoing training, the I'm just late, I'm tired, the clock hours to keep up your licensure. Once you have gained a license, we're talking about the inclusion of courses for that. So we've got folks from every tribal nation in Minnesota. We have 7 recognized Ojibwe tribes and 4 recognized Dakota tribes in Minnesota. So we have representatives from each of the tribes there. Whether they choose to send someone from their government arm or from their education arm, we have had a lot of first speakers of Dakota and Ojibwe involved at our meetings, which has been nice to get that always with that guiding perspective in hand.
I know in your Washington specific, nineties, early 2000s, we had First Peoples Language Committee, which was grassroots, addressing the same thing of, you know, the threat of dying of languages in our, and elders not accorded stature as they should, as the authority in the language, and being treated as, you know, per se, paraprofessionals in the classroom, and knowing that the language is in dire straits back 10 years ago, you know, it was like all First Peoples language instructors such as myself felt compelled to do something, and so we forward this is it took time to finally get legislation through the state. It's known as 1495 language and history and culture and history. So they finally installed that, but you know, a lot of tribes are in varying degrees of development. You know, some are like the Cladums. They already got 3 or 4 teachers certified within their own right. And the way it's set up, the tribes individual do their own certification, and then the state just endorses whatever they, for the purpose of teaching in public schools. But it's initially the responsibility of tribes to set the standards.
That's our license too, our K-12 language and culture license. Yep, the tribes endorse it, and then, then it's a state teaching.
Yeah, it's basically our fight was to say that, you know, we're doing it as co-equals, you know.
Yeah.
Not as we wait for their beck and call.
Right.
You know, we certify our own, and that's what we certify as, and they just merely stamp the certificate as you know, as that was done. Not to say that they're the experts and they're doing the certifying, but just to authenticate it per their books.
Yep.
So this, you know, it's a struggle everywhere. I see it, you know, and there's some tribes that are leaps and bounds kill. They've got several teachers that come out of their language program. Cloud has about 3 or 4 teachers, and there's in the wings. I started a teacher training program a couple years ago, but it was defunded, so I got to pick up the pieces and start over. So it's always a funding issue, or political, which also entails political issues, and so it's a daily chore to get up in the morning and look yourself in the mirror.
Yes, I have a question.
Well, there's,
Is there another question? Go ahead.
Please. I wonder what this movement has meant to the parents of these children in your community.
Our immersion movement,
Yes.
our legislative and policy movement,
Excuse me, the immersion movement, to have their children, you know, to have revitalization of the language in the community.
Some of the things that we've heard and some of the things that we observe and record are greater participation in decision making regarding my child's education. A lot of these people do not go into the public schools in the area. They have a bad taste in their mouth regarding a school institution and their own experiences. Now they're required to participate in our school. We make it look like grandma's home. We make it look like our living rooms. We do a lot of not just social activities and citizenship building with the kids, but we have to do it as adults. If we're not doing it, why would we expect the kids to do it? So it does It's pulling people out of their shells and saying, this is our school. You know, we need you in here for decision making. We need you to come out on parent night and give a vote on this project or on this thing that we're doing. We need you to come out and approve budgets. That all goes before our parent committee. So increased participation, that's huge. We ask that they commit to maintaining Ojibwe language in the home. Some people do, some people don't. You know, we're not gonna force anybody. We can't force people to do it. But it has meant an increase in Ojibwe language spoken in the community. And they are so darn proud of their kids and they're so happy with them. It can be a stabilizing factor. I talked earlier today about how we ask for a long-term commitment to our school. We say if you want to enroll your child in our school, they start at kindergarten, they're going to finish out at 6th grade. That's a 7-year commitment at least. If your kid doesn't repeat a grade in there, maybe your kid does. Maybe your kid wants to or needs to repeat a year somewhere. We're asking for a 7-year commitment. It's a lot, man. It's a lot when you're just enrolling a kid in kindergarten. Well, I'm just putting my kid in school. The law says I have to. I need some daycare. I need some childcare. You know, I'm asking you to consider the next 7 years of your child's schooling. It does become a stabilizing factor because we tell people if you move in and out of the area, this is not the school for you. You take your child out once, you have one chance to re-enroll within a year. You have to go before our parent committee, you have to go before our elders committee, you have to go before our school board and state why you think it would be a good idea for your kid to come back in and, you know, that they can finish out the course. It's you know, you're really making a commitment. So it's been a stabilizing factor in some people's lives. It gave us an entry point into just talking about culture. We had such rapid cultural shift in our communities in Leech Lake that people don't know how to go about our ceremonies. People don't know how to get names for their babies anymore. People don't know how to pass tobacco to ask for knowledge. People don't know how to find our ceremonies and how to learn about them. This is a place where it's okay to ask about that, and it's another entry point for people. And some people get really scared. It's really freaky. What does it mean for the parents is your question. It's really freaky, man. They're not reading in English after 1st grade. No, your child is reading polysyllabic words in Ojibwe. Have you stopped and read along with your child in Ojibwe? I'm sorry, your child is not reading in English right now. We don't teach them English reading until 3rd grade. If you would like to work on English reading with them at home, feel free. But have you stopped and read along in Ojibwe with them? Crazy polysyllabic words that these kids are mastering at a really early age, you know. So it's scary. We hope it works. Don't pull your kid out. Hopefully it all turns out good for him. You know, it's a pretty big leap to include your child in Ojibwe language immersion on our site.
Is there anybody in your community that's working with new babies and parenting groups? You know, when I had my sons, we formed a group. We got together every week. I was thinking that would be really a neat place to start the language.
That would be a great place to start it. No, there's not a lot. No, it's really capacity building efforts. You want to talk about who has high enough levels of language proficiency to just operate, who's got cultural knowledge to operate. We're talking about a couple handful of people left in our communities, people who are physically able to get up and move around or physically able to welcome people into their own home, if they have cultural or language knowledge to share, or second language learners who are reaching a higher level of proficiency and able to pass that along. A couple of handful of people right now. we really are in need of capacity building. More rigorous courses at college level, more rigorous courses at university level, more deeper study of oratory and rhetoric and more, just more study of our language is necessary and opportunities to do that. Capacity building. Slow going, but very worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did, two questions. First one is, you said you added a grade on every year,
Uh-huh.
and so now you have, what, up to 7th grade?
6th grade.
6th grade. Do you ever let parents enroll their kids after kindergarten? And then this, like, how much after kindergarten, like, can they come in at any grade level? That's the first question. And my second question is, you work with a lot of stakeholders and have a lot of meetings with different constituencies who have different experiences or expertise on coming together on one topic. How do you get everyone to come to one mind?
It's never easy. Okay, your first one was what now?
The grades.
The grades. Oh, we've got some folks who put their kids through kindergarten in an English school first, and we say, nope, your kid's gonna be here for 7 years. If you're okay with us calling your kid a kindergartner, that's fine. We have small class sizes and we have multi-age classrooms, so it's really easy for us to differentiate what it is wherever they're at. We just say, give me 7 years. We don't typically take kids after kindergarten or 1st grade level though, because we are starting to get into content areas in 2nd grade, in 3rd grade, and 4th grade, and we need their language proficiency to be up there. It's pretty hard to gain a level of proficiency to operate in all the content areas, even at a 2nd grade level, if they come in from the English setting. So we don't typically take them late entry. We haven't had too many people come through. If there were a child who came from a Ojibwe speaking home and, had a pretty high level of proficiency, we might consider an entry, but in that case we just do language proficiency interviews and see how they do. There's a lot of stuff you can transfer over, depending on their language development. A lot of stuff they can transfer over from knowing in English to working on the content in Ojibwe. But again, our end goal is Ojibwe speakers. So it's not just being able to rattle off content and understand and be a receptive listener, but really high level Ojibwe speaker. And then constituencies, we do a lot of trainings on community organizing. My parents were community organizers. They were just amazing at it. My grandparents were community organizers. This is what I was born to do. And I too am doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I feel. Doing this. But Minnesota's got a pretty big private foundation community, and we have a lot of different leadership efforts that are sponsored by private foundations and within our state. They offer a lot of trainings, and we just look at a lot of capacity building initiatives and try to figure out how can we build this in our community. It's hard. We go for consensus within our meetings. Ojibways have a really cool way of looking at truth. That every individual has their own perception of the world and their own perception of the truth. If yours varies from mine because you're sitting there looking in this direction and I'm standing here looking in this direction, I can't change your truth. You have every right to that because you are sitting right there and that's the direction you're facing and that's what you're seeing. You have every right to that. I have no right to try to change that for you. So yeah, that's pretty tough sometimes when there's really contentious issues on the table. But we always push for this, and in the end, you know, it's about the kids. It's about the kids, it's about raising a new generation of Ojibwe speakers. We just say, it's about our language, it's about the future of our language. In the end, what is benefiting that?
For this wonderful evening, and thank you all for coming. Mark your calendars for next year, for sometime in the spring. Maybe Leslie needs to come back and share more. We have until 8 o'clock, so, please, in honor of Leslie Harper, eat more food.
Please, nothing with sweets anymore.
Exactly.
You guys just stuff yourself silly with saying.